All right, thank you, everybody. To close out the unclassified portion of this year's conference, we are very pleased to welcome General Stephen Whiting, the commander of United States Space Command. General Whiting is the commander, U.S. Space Command, headquartered at Peterson Space Force Base, Colorado. As the commander of U.S. Space Command, General Whiting is responsible for defending U.S. and allied interests in the space domain while providing space-enabled combat effects to joint warfighters around the globe. He exercises combatant command authority over soldiers, Marines, sailors, airmen, and guardians operating ground and space-based systems around the world. He is a space operations officer and has commanded the squadron, wing, and numbered Air Force command levels. Prior to his current position, General Whiting was the commander of Space Operations Command. And I did leave one item of particular interest out of that bio. If you recall, as we opened up the conference, we had remarks from General Latendra and Colonel Hall about part of the reason why we hold this conference here at the U.S. Air Force Academy, as this is the location where so many of our future space officers are educated and start their careers. To that note, General Whiting is a 1989 distinguished graduate of the United States Air Force Academy with a degree in aeronautical engineering. So I think it's very interesting to see the evolution now coming back. And in fact, my understanding is that while he was here as a cadet, he wrote a paper on the stand-up of the first iteration of U.S. Space Command. I'm sure it received an A, sir. So with that, I would like to turn it over to General Whiting. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Well, Professor Biller, thanks for that introduction, and thank you to our staff judge advocate team for leading this conference. For those of you here for the first time, welcome to beautiful Colorado, home of U.S. Space Command's headquarters. And for the rest, welcome back to our 4th annual legal conference to discuss space futures. You know, sometimes they say they save the best for last, but today I'm sorry to say they've saved the last for last, but we will struggle on. Special thanks to the U.S. Air Force Academy Law Department for hosting this conference. Space law is a vital field for those of us in the space business, and I am pleased to see our annual legal conference continue to expand each year. Since our first conference in 2021, we have seen significant growth in attendance by our allies and our commercial partners. There are panelists and contributors from all across the Department of Defense, and all our services are represented as well as commercial participants. All 10 combined space operations nations are participating this year, as well as a strong academic participation, including our academic enterprise engagement members. Our numbers are an indication of the growing importance of space law and policy issues to shaping norms, defining applicable law, and guiding operations. The diverse perspectives you all bring prove to be our strength. Just as we are emphasizing putting space in joint and joint in space, it's imperative that we continue to build the bench of space-minded legal professionals. We need to continue to grow our talent base for space professionals, but this in particular is the case for the low-density, high-skilled professionals such as space law experts. As we continue to work with stakeholders and normalize responsible behavior in space, it's essential that we do so with a firm legal basis and consistency with relevant international and national laws. This is particularly important when our competitors may seek to exploit the law to gain an asymmetric advantage. The lawyers and operators in this room will be critical to our ultimate success. We've seen that our competition with the PRC is asymmetric in nature. Their use of lawfare to apply maritime exclusion zones to their man-made islands in the South China Sea and their increasing basing presence in Antarctica provide us a blueprint for what they may one day attempt to do on the moon or in other key terrain on orbit. We can only counter these actions by having the legal expertise to think through these complex challenges. The space domain is becoming more congested and contested by the day. At the same time, we're increasingly reliant on space capabilities for our national security and modern way of life. It also creates significant economic opportunities. This means we can expect space competition to manifest itself in all instruments of national power: diplomatic, information, military, and economic. Your expertise is needed to help us navigate through how we outpace our competitors in all of those domains. Frankly, we need your expertise now more than ever. Despite our desire to maintain a safe and sustainable space environment, our competitors continue to transform space into a warfighting domain. The joint force relies on space-based capabilities to project and employ power here on terra firma. Our strategic competitors seek to exploit that dependency. The PRC and Russia intend to limit our access to space during crisis and conflict, and they are deliberately fielding counterspace capabilities to that end. NATO has recently recognized space as a new operational domain and stated that attacks to, from, and within space present a clear challenge to the security of the alliance. Our most concerning international competitors, the PRC and Russia, have been making significant strides in the development of their own space technologies in recent years and have reorganized their militaries to place increased emphasis on the space domain. Both countries realized the importance of military space activities and stood up dedicated space organizations in 2015, namely the People's Liberation Army Strategic Support Force and the Russian Aerospace Forces. The PRC has also launched robust and capable space services, including space-based intelligence, reconnaissance and surveillance, global navigation, communication systems, and more. These capabilities provide the PLA with the ability to command and control their forces far from their own shores and provide them enhanced situational awareness, enabling them to monitor, track, and potentially target U.S. and allied forces. Most alarmingly, the PRC and Russia have made rapid advancements in counterspace systems designed to hold our space capabilities at risk and have begun incorporating them into their military plans. In 2019, our national leaders recognized that our competitors had turned space into a warfighting domain, and in response to these increased threats to our critical space assets, U.S. Space Command was established as the nation's 11th combatant command. Today, U.S. Space Command is an ING command, meaning we are supporting our other combatant commands, and we are only as successful as these other fellow combatant commands and partners who we support with critical space effects. However, U.S. Space Command is also an ED command, meaning when we are operating in our area of responsibility, we are supported by other combatant commands. We deliver effects for others, and we fight to keep doing so against all threats. I stress to our command regularly that we must equally embrace our ED and our ING responsibilities. Now, our command is laser focused on our Title X obligations. In case you weren't aware, U.S. federal law explicitly lays out the primary duties of combatant commanders. And you can be sure that when federal law states, quote, "Here are your primary duties," I am fascinated by what follows. Specifically, Title X states that my primary duty as U.S. Space Command Commander is to, number one, produce plans for the employment of the armed forces to execute national defense strategies and respond to significant military contingencies. And number two, I am also responsible to take actions as necessary to deter conflict. And finally, number three, to command the U.S. Armed Forces as directed. Now, in addition to these primary duties, which apply to all combatant commanders, at U.S. Space Command, we have 5 unique responsibilities that are outlined in the Unified Command Plan, a direct order from the President of the United States. Those are Space Operations, Global Sensor Manager, Global SATCOM Operations Manager, Trans-Regional Missile Defense, and Space Joint Force Provider. Now, let me put this plainly. At U.S. Space Command, we have a moral responsibility to provide space capabilities to the joint force, the nation, and our allies. The reason this is so important is because the U.S. Armed Forces and those of our allies are sized with the implicit assumption that they will have access to space capabilities through all levels of conflict. In World War II, we regularly sent hundreds of bombers on a mission to take out a single target. And I hope you've been watching the new Masters of the Air show on Apple TV to see what that looked like, because that was true courage. There were even bomber raids which had over 1,000 bombers involved, and each of those bombers had 10 to 15 aircrew on board, meaning that in World War II, we would put 10 to 15,000 airmen over a single target. And with a loss rate at times between 10 and 20%, that meant 1,000 to 3,000 airmen either died in the raid were captured as POWs, or were evading in Western Europe to get back to safety, and that single target complex they attacked might not even be completely destroyed. Today, that attack would be conducted with a couple of stealth bombers with a handful of aircrew on each plane, and because of space capabilities, those bombers would now attack multiple target sets with high probability they would successfully destroy most, if not all of them. So as you see, without space, the joint force doesn't even have the force structure to fight the way we did in World War II, because we don't have anywhere close to 1,000 bombers anymore. And I could give equal examples across all of our services. Space allows the joint force to have global command and control, untethered to terrestrial networks. Space allows us to know what the threats and weather will be like at the target location. And it allows us to synchronize in time and precisely engage anywhere, whether we are delivering precision-guided munitions or humanitarian aid. Simply put, space fulfills the desire of virtually every commander throughout history. It allows us to always command the high ground while knowing what's on the other side of the next hill and all the hills we might encounter. That is a capability we cannot lose. So this is why our highest priority is to ensure we can continue to support the joint force through all levels of conflict. And this leads to U.S. Space Command's second priority: protecting and defending our space capabilities against the threats now arrayed against us. As I spoke about a moment ago, the threats we now see arrayed against our space capabilities are significant and have grown quickly, and we must protect our current space constellations, most of which were built or had the requirements established in a much more benign time in space. And finally, U.S. Space Command must protect the joint force from space-enabled attack by others. Countries like the PRC are using space to make their terrestrial forces more lethal, precise, and far-ranging. We must be able to protect the joint force from these types of potential adversary capabilities. And we can't do all this alone. Our national security and defense strategies are built on a foundation of cooperation. The national security strategy asserts that the U.S. will ensure the space domain's sustainability, safety, stability, and security by working alongside our mission partners. For example, we plan to expand how we work with key commercial partners by better sharing information on the threats we all now face in the domain. And we are enhancing the resilience of U.S. space systems. Leading in space means acting responsibly and consistently with the unique international legal regime for space. The Outer Space Treaty was signed by the U.S. and UK and the Soviet Union in early 1967, entering into force in October 1967. That treaty provides the basic framework of international space law, establishing such foundational matters as the freedom of all nations to use and explore outer space. 114 nations have ratified the Outer Space Treaty, including all major spacefaring nations. New nations such as Panama and Croatia have even ratified it as recently as August of last year, a testament to the treaty's underlying principles. However, challenges to our best intentions and authentic motives arise, and that is where legal precedent and authority is necessary. A prime example is the tension between the freedom of use principle of the Outer Space Treaty and the requirement that activities be conducted with due regard, a principle also established in the same document, as well as the DoD's tenets of responsible behaviors in space, published just last year. When is the right to free use, the right for a country to place its satellites into any orbit it desires, limited by the due regard principle? The treaty doesn't answer that directly. It doesn't prescribe a certain amount of distance or a specific communication requirement for these activities. It has some guidance on communicating about activities that could potentially cause harmful interference, but to date, no state has relied on that provision. One of the key advantages of leveraging capabilities in space is that space law codifies the overflight of other countries by on-orbit satellites. Since sovereign airspace does not extend into space, space allows us free overflight of every point on Earth, something no other domain affords. Article 1 of the Outer Space Treaty states, quote, "Outer space, including the moon and other celestial bodies, shall be free for exploration and the use by all states without discrimination of any kind," unquote. But there is no agreed upon point where space begins, and thus the Outer Space Treaty applies and airspace ends. Academics look at this issue in two ways: Spatially, where aerodynamic lift fails due to the lack of atmospheric pressure, what we call the Kármán line. And functionally, an object intended to go to outer space operates under space law during its use. The latter definition implies an overflight right of another country's sovereign airspace, with or without permission, for an object bound for space, even though that may occur at altitudes lower than the Kármán line. Today, we are seeing unprecedented commercial activity and growth. Many more and diverse governments participate. Many more and diverse government participants and rapidly evolving threats in the domain. As mentioned previously, the tenets of responsible behavior in space and associated specific actions published by the SecDef recently, and which are directive upon the Department of Defense, are helpful to help shape space operations conducted under the international space law construct so that normal operations and tests do not contribute to strategic instability, confusion, misunderstanding, or miscalculation. As a military organization, U.S. Space Command also pays close attention to the law of war. Some may ask, does the law of war apply exactly the same in space as on Earth? And such questions are why combatant commanders have operational lawyers. Harmonizing how different bodies of law, such as space law and the law of war, apply across the conflict continuum is a challenging legal task. Lawyers also provide law or value in interpreting and applying policy that implements legal obligations, such as rules of engagement for space operations. While operational authorities may be held at high levels in the space domain because of the national significance of activities there, the underlying ROE process and principles should be familiar to lawyers experienced into advising on terrestrial military operations. As in any domain, I expect lawyers on my staff and component staffs to be familiar enough with all the relevant weapons, technologies, physical environment, and legal regimes to provide cogent legal advice. I'm grateful to the military services for recognizing the need for attorneys with specialized education in space and providing them to U.S. Space Command. U.S. Space Command has the incredible responsibility to protect and defend our nation in space. We leverage our legal team and hardworking staff every day, but our team is much broader than our staff and component commands. As I said earlier, we can't do it alone. At the time of our first legal conference a few years ago, we had 124 space situational awareness data sharing agreements. Currently, U.S. Space Command has agreements with 32 nations, 2 intergovernmental organizations, 7 academic institutions, and over 140 commercial satellite owner-operators and service providers. So now we're up to 185. We will continue to rely on our legal team's expertise as we formalize even more of these partnerships. Our commercial partnerships are also critical to our ability to maintain a technical advantage. Historically, access to space was limited to the few, and governments maintained the lead in space technology. Over the past few years, that dynamic has changed. Today, the commercial sector is moving incredibly rapid, presenting new opportunities and challenges to national security space. These relationships are critical to our operations and our planning as we make advancements with cutting-edge technology such as machine learning and artificial intelligence. Our commercial mission partners are a significant force multiplier, and they lead in many commercial capabilities compared to our competitors. In fact, this is why I call this time we are living in the second golden age of space, with American commercial industry leading the way in innovation and awe-inspiring efforts. For this reason, U.S. Space Command is leveraging commercial and academic capabilities to augment our military forces. Our partnerships are focused on the future as well. We are leaning forward to maintain our position of advantage and stay ahead of the threat in a rapidly changing environment. Our commercial and academic partners make us better. And we must be better. The domain requires it. Increased cislunar operations are coming in the future, and I'm excited to hear that this has been a focus of the last 2 days. The Cislunar Technology Strategy Interagency Working Group of the National Science and Technology Council outlined a U.S. cislunar science and technology strategy to support research and development to enable future growth, extend space situational awareness, and ensure that capabilities for U.S. government cislunar operations are scalable and interoperable with systems operated by private and international actors. As cislunar operations grow, so too must the ability of U.S. Space Command to navigate the associated operational and legal challenges. And just yesterday, I was at Starbase down in Boca Chica, Texas. I believe in my lifetime, and certainly probably within the careers of these cadets sitting on the front row, we will see a colony on Mars. And what does that mean for national defense? We will need the professionals in this room or your children to help us understand that. U.S. Space Command will use our role as the DoD's leader in the space AOR to emphasize our commitment to preserving the space domain through responsible norms of behavior in space, and to partner with all our stakeholders to promote a safe, secure, and sustainable space AOR to assure U.S. and allied freedom of action in space. The highly trained and space-minded legal professionals here today and attending virtually will help us to realize our vision and ensure U.S. Space Command meets our moral responsibilities. Together, we will work across the space enterprise to establish and normalize responsible behavior in space, ensuring we always operate with a firm legal basis consistent with U.S. law, national security requirements, space treaties, and legal precedent. U.S. Space Command will support these activities through our campaign plan, and I assure you, we welcome your assistance in this endeavor to ensure there is never a day without space. So thank you for your kind attention here at the end of the day, and I look forward to your questions.
Well, thank you so much, General. As folks are moving, I see we're having folks move to the mic
Okay,
now. So
great, thank you.
General Whiting, thank you very much for your comments. Charles Gabbard from the Mitchell Institute. You mentioned the science and technology strategy that was so pivotal in shaping where the nation is heading as a whole related to cislunar. I believe that the DoD should come up with a similar document to outline what it will do as an entity supporting that larger strategy. What are your thoughts on how the DoD and particularly Space Command should be moving forward when it comes to thinking about long-term vision for cislunar?
Yeah, good to see you, Charles, and I saw your recent paper on that very topic. So cislunar, that future is coming. Today, we've got to be very prioritized with the resources that we have, and the vast majority of our space missions today are what I would call Earth-facing. We are supporting our terrestrial warfighting teammates. We're protecting and defending our assets on orbit. But we do have to improve our ability to do space domain awareness in ex-geo, beyond geo, cislunar. And then we've got to really be focused on when is the day coming where unique military missions will have to go to the moon and beyond. Sometimes our sea services talk about a brown water Navy and a blue water Navy. Today we're a brown water space military enterprise. The day will come when we'll be a blue water space military enterprise. We don't want to be surprised by others getting there first. So we've got to look at operations and prototypes today to get us ready for the future. And as you're aware, we have a unit that's a part of U.S. Space Force presented to U.S. Space Command that's doing that very thing, the 19th Space Defense Squadron, helping us to understand our requirements for how to do space domain awareness at cislunar. And then we're supportive of the Air Force Research Lab's prototype mission that they have going in the next few years to cislunar as well. So I think we need to use the time we have right now to lay down those requirements and figure out how we want to operate. That'll be our first best guess because we'll have to go there to really figure that out and actually conduct operations there. That day is coming. As I said, we got to get ready for it, but it is not quite today. So hopefully that answered your question, Charles.
Sir, my name is Lieutenant Colonel Rob Williamson. I'm with the Rhode Island National Guard. And I just wanted to get your thoughts on what type of reserve force you see happening for the Space Force.
Did you say reserve force?
Oh, or National Guard.
Oh, National Guard. Okay. Yeah. Now I'm going to address that outside my role as the United States Space Command commander, and now as a guardian of the United States Space Force. And you probably know better than me, this is an issue on Capitol Hill. This actually literally takes an act of Congress. And so there was an act of Congress on the reserve side. And do we have any reserve component personnel here? Okay. And that reserve component legislation allowed the Space Force to create a unified system of full-timers and part-timers that is different than the other services where you have active duty and then people in a separate reserve component. And so that'll give the Space Force an opportunity to be a test bed for the department on how that works out. Do we have any Australian personnel here in the audience? And I highlight them, okay, because it was based on an Australian model. This is how Australia does their reserve forces. On the National Guard, that is being discussed in the Congress right now. That will take, again, a literal act of Congress. And until that happens, we are reliant at Space Command on the capabilities that in particular, the Air National Guard executes with the Space Force and then gives us those capabilities. And of course, they're all Title 10 when they're acting on our behalf. But from my perspective, we just don't want to see any break in those capabilities, whatever the final answer of the Congress and the administration comes up with, and we'll have to see how that plays out. I hope that got after your question. Thank you.
Sir, great to see you here. Major Segmuller, I'm a reservist on orders in your J2. I'm an intelligence officer on the reserve side, but attorney on the civilian side. You mentioned in your comments about the importance of sharing threat information with our commercial partners. Can you expand on that a little bit?
I can, yeah. For about a decade now, we have an organization, that's the wrong word. We have a cell out at Vandenberg Space Force Base, and I see Sarah Mount sitting back there, so Sarah, you'll correct me here, called the Commercial Integration Cell, where we have partnered with 10 space companies that contract with the Department of Defense. And we have signed agreements where they have all partnered, even though they compete for contracts elsewhere. In this Commercial Integration Cell, they have come together, hired personnel that sit on the ops floor at the Combined Space Operations Center, and they have insights into the threats that we're seeing there at the classification levels that we look at those things at. They give us insights into what they're seeing with their constellations. Are they seeing electromagnetic interference? Are they seeing disruptions on orbit that we could correlate to maybe disruptions we're seeing in our constellations? And we have found that to be very effective. So these competitors in one environment cooperate with us, and then we can best share that information. We are looking to expand that here this year because now we have an agreement with the National Reconnaissance Office and the NGA, where we've agreed that U.S. Space Command will help share that same kind of information with companies that they contract with for ISR information. And so we're working how we're going to do that now. But we think that's very important, that we're sharing that kind of information with the companies that we rely on to support us back with communications, ISR, space domain awareness information, those kind of things. I hope that got after your question. Okay. Anyone else? Okay, we won't make this any more painful then. Thank you all for being here at the end of the day.
Well, thank you very much, General Whiting, for taking the time to address us, and I hope you accept this token of our appreciation.